Here we go!
There's a pretty good rule of thumb when it comes to creating something worth having. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. That, and don't mess with perfection. If you're like me and you played countless hours of the original NES Super Mario Bros., then it likely has become the baseline by which you measure all other platformer games. When playing a game, I think my muscle memory is subconsciously asking, how does this game measure up with Super Mario Bros.? I think one of the reasons why Super Mario Bros. Had so much replayability had a lot to do with the amount of control that we had over Mario. And probably one of the most fundamental and yet overlooked components of the Mario player controller was the jump. In most player controller tutorials I've seen online, the mechanics of the jump controller is to push the player up with force. And while this makes the controller pretty easy to set up, it just doesn't feel like Super Mario Bros. In Bored to Bits' YouTube video, Better Jumping with 4 Lines of Code, he explains why this is. When something is pushed up with force, it takes the same amount of time for it to go up as it does to come down. And this just isn't the way that gravity works. Force equals mass times acceleration. The acceleration of gravity is about 32 feet per second per second. In other words, when falling towards the Earth, your body will accelerate until it gets enough wind resistance. Super Mario Bros. Compensated for this by making the arc of the jump slow at the beginning and fast towards the end. That's why Mario's jump was great, and the jump in your game just doesn't feel good. But worry not, that ends today, all without a single line of code.
If you want to follow along in this tutorial, you're going to need 3 things. First, I'm going to be using Bolt Visual Scripting add-on from Unity, which, if you're not using that yet, do you just use your head to keep the rain off your neck? I mean, seriously, visual scripting is awesome. It's free, it's easy to install, and I say that without getting any kind of compensation from Unity or Bolt. I'm also going to be using the Bolt 2D Platformer Tutorial Kit as a template. And if you need help on how to fix any errors you might encounter when downloading these files, I made a video series where I walk through the tutorial from start to finish. I'll put a link in the description for all 3 things. To fix our jump issue, we're going to need to look at our problem objectively. When we jump, we need the gravity scale to increase on the down for the player, but not for the up. That way our jump feels more lifelike, not too heavy. Also, in Super Mario Bros., Mario had the ability to control the jump depending on how the button was held. Holding the button gives a long jump burst, but quickly pressing the button and letting off gave a short jump burst. So we know what we need to do. Let's get started. Okay, first things first, we need to know how the jump function actually works on our player controller. Whenever the jump button is pressed down, and you can know what the jump button is by going to Edit, Project Settings, Input Manager. They actually have 2 configured with Unity. Jump, it's spacebar, and then we have Jump, joystick button 3 for controller support. You can change that to whatever you like. But when the jump button is pressed down, then something needs to happen. When that's true, what we do is we add force to the Rigid Body 2D player controller, or the component on our player controller, and we increase the Y by whatever our jump variable is. So we put a variable here called jump. It's a float. We put 12 units of force. It's going to push the object up and then bring it back down whenever we hit that jump button. We also have a simple ground check that's set up. That what this does is it essentially shoots a raycast, or in this case a circle cast, down towards the ground layer, the platform layer, and if it doesn't come back as true, then it won't let the player jump again. If you want more information on how to set one of these up, I would strongly encourage the tutorial. I'll put a link in the description below. Okay, so the first thing we need to do is add a new variable to our player component. So going to player prefab and going down to variables, let's add a new variable and call it fall multiplier. And adding that, we're going to make that a float, and let's just set it to 5 for right now. We can change that later on if we need to. Next, let's scroll down on our player graph just a little bit, give us some space, and we actually need a fixed update for this variable. Okay, so we're going to run from fixed update, and let's start a branch. So we need a true-false statement. And when this variable is true, then we need to set gravity scale rigid body 2D. That would be 3D or just a rigid body if you were on a 3D game. And let's tell it to get variable, get object variable of our fall multiplier. And we also need a little bit more information plugged into this to make sure what is true. We're going to do, let's back up just a little bit over here, and let's start with a get velocity. Rigid body 2D get velocity of the y. We don't need the x, we just need the y, rigid body or vector 2. And if it is less, if a is less than 0, then we need to get the object of the fall multiplier. So what this is doing is when y is going down, when it is less than 0, which your velocity only goes less than 0 when you are going downwards, it goes into the negative. So whenever it goes negative, whenever it goes less than 0, then we need to set the gravity scale to our fall multiplier. And just to keep things neat and tidy, I would really recommend giving it a group, and let's call that group better jumping. And I like to color code mine, so you might have your own system for this. Green means it does something. When we test this out, you should notice that your jump just kind of feels a little bit more stiff. It's not jumping as high as it used to, but you are getting that fall effect to where you're going down faster than when you're going up. And so in order to change this, just go and play with the variable a little bit. I like putting my jump at 16. Now the player should be jumping about the same height that it was jumping before, but this time we're getting that downward force on our character.
And just in case you don't notice a difference, here I'm running the player off the side with this component and without. Now you see I didn't notice a difference. Here it is side by side. Notice the one on the right gets to the ground a lot faster than the ones to the left. And I'm not speeding up the video, that's just what the gravity does. It's less of a floaty feel. So it's not just the jump, here I am walking both players off the side, here it is side by side. Now one of the things to be aware of is that with the video on the right, they're getting pulled down to the ground much faster, so you'll notice it goes down through the rigid body at a lot more force. This can cause the player to go through the ground, so this might be something we need to adjust a little bit later on. Okay, so let's address this other jump option that we have, and that is when we let off the button, or we just tap the button, we want kind of like a little half jump, but when we hold it, we want him to get a full jump. And so in order to do this, what we're going to need to do is go to our player, we're going to add another variable, and let's call this low jump multiplier. And because this is the last variable, well, first let's give it a float and give it 15. And we'll come back and adjust that number if we have to later on. But because it's the last variable, go up to overrides and hit apply all, and that should apply it to all of your player characters across all levels. So we'll put it on the prefab itself. Okay, so what we're going to need to do for this part is let's go to add unit on button input, and let's once again get the jump button. Whenever the jump button is let up, then what we're going to need to do is a true and false statement. Go to branch, and we're going to set the gravity scale to our new variable, which is going to be get object variable, and that is going to be our low jump multiplier. Now, the way that we're going to work this is go back over here to the left just a little bit, and we're going to do that same thing we did before. We're going to get velocity on our y, so vector 2 get y. Okay, and we need it to not equal 0. So whenever this is not the same as 0, in other words, when we're not moving, we need to put float 0. We need it to actually fire this half jump system. So let's test that out and see if that works. So now what you should see whenever you jump with your player is when you hold the button down, he gets a high jump, but when you just barely tap it, he gets kind of like a little half jump.
And you can adjust this number however you like just by messing with these modifiers that we put on there, the little multipliers. Sometimes when playing games, we notice a difference between an okay game and a great game, but we can't really distinguish what the difference is. Well, the difference is in the little things, which is why making sure our jump is fine-tuned is so important. I hope this tutorial was helpful for you, and hopefully now your jump doesn't suck. But then again, maybe there's another issue that needs to be worked out. Does your character need multiple jumps in the air? If only someone did a tutorial on how to do that. Maybe somebody has.